on me. And then, cool. Get adjusted here. Here's a little bit of Frank down there helping with class. And have you guys ever seen the portrait of Frank on the wall?
No.
No, we haven't seen it.
Oh, it's so cute.
You have a portrait of Frank?
Aww.
Okay.
What did you...
We're recording. Yeah, we're ready to go. All right, let's go ahead and screen share. We started talking early abolition yesterday, guys, and we left off with things like Nat Turner's revolt, and we talked a little bit about William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator, and we're right at about in 1830. So I just wanted to kind of continue with that. Again, if you want to get your Chapter 11 learning targets out or pull up the Chapter 11 slides, that might be helpful. But just look at the vocabulary again and remind yourself about the specifics that you need to know. Looking at the vocabulary, guys, if you can, even if you don't remember it, but it's like, it sounds familiar, then that's a positive. We can work with that. But this is the vocabulary I want you to work with. Yeah, we'll finish these last couple learning targets today, basically the last 4. So yeah, great. All right, so we started talking about William Lloyd Garrison's Liberator, and I want to talk to you about an early group, guys, that will be heavily influenced by the Second Great Awakening. And you need to know what the American Anti-Slavery Society is, guys. It is arguably the biggest society, or I should say biggest fraternal organization that is demanding immediate abolition. I guess fraternal organization isn't the right thing to say because they do allow women, so I guess it's not a fraternal organization since it's mixed gender, but whatever. Don't trip off of my misuse of what kind of organization it is. You need to know what this group is, guys. You need to know what their strategy is. The strategy of the American Anti-Slavery Society is going to be to flood the nation with literature. They're going to be a very influential group at convincing many Americans, North and South, that, I might not be for living in a mixed race society, but I'm starting to think that slavery might just be wrong. This is that big postal campaign where they literally are just going to post song lyrics. They're going to have, children's books and readers. They'll have images of slaves and working in bondage sent throughout the mail. They'll have slave narratives. This is like around the time when Frederick Douglass's narrative is going to be coming out relatively soon. And we have other firsthand accounts of slaves escaping from slavery and making it to the North. They're trying to make Americans aware of what slaves are going through. They'll have accounts of slave auctions and of families being separated. They'll make sure they have firsthand accounts of sexual abuses and stuff like that. They're trying to open Americans' eyes to the reality of slavery, folks. That's the goal of this group, the American Anti-Slavery Society. They're hardcore evangelical Christians. They want to perfect society in a way that they think God would be proud of. And they think God would be pleased if they can eliminate slavery, the evil of slavery. And they're going to try to eliminate it by opening up the eyes of Americans to their massive literature campaign. There's lots of wealthy people involved in this group, and those are essentially the financiers of it. This is not a government program. This is not a government-funded group. This is essentially an evangelical reform-based group. And so again, what's their strategy? It's to flood the nation with literature. They're also going to be major helpers on the Underground Railroad. There'll be African-American members of this group as well, guys. And just be aware, they try to help slaves escape slavery and subvert the will of their masters. I don't know how eloquently I spoke on that, but you must know this group. We're going to see different sources, guys, like John C. Calhoun. Remember, he's that important senator from South Carolina. He's going to actually kind of threaten the Postal Service and demand that the Postal Service stop circulating abolitionist literature through his state. And that's pretty powerful statement to say, to demand that the post office stop carrying, literature of a certain content. It's quite a restriction on freedom of speech, but you guys are aware of what abolitionists are saying. They're trying to essentially end the Southern economic way of life. So it makes perfect sense why men like John C. Calhoun would react very, very, radically to this type of literature. Cool. We'll keep moving along here, folks. We know what the Underground Railroad is. Any essay on abolition should mention the Underground Railroad. We have lots of very important characters in it, folks, that really go unnamed throughout history. Harriet Tubman is one of the prominent African-American female abolitionist that is involved in the Underground Railroad, but just know what it is. It's helping slaves escape. It's a series of safe houses. If you're escaping from the South all the way to the North, I need a series of barns I can sleep in. I need people who won't tell on me. I might need someone to leave out some food in the barn. I just might need someone to look the other way. It's a series of safe houses. It's a connection, and then primarily it's members of the American Anti-Slavery Society. But that's what the Underground Railroad is. It's people helping you out along your way to freedom. So make sure you know that vocab term and be able to utilize it. So I like this this poster right here, guys. It's from the 1830s. You can see right here, and just look at the language. Outrage. You know, I don't know if you remember me in class. This is when I would bang on my desk and yell and startle a couple people who had fallen asleep. It's an abolitionist of the most revolting character is among you. He's exciting the feelings of the North against the South. A seditious lecture is to be delivered this evening. He's telling people to come out and put this lecture down. You're requested to attend and unite in putting down and silencing by peaceable means this tool of evil and fanaticism. You have to understand, guys, how many people view abolitionists. Many people in the 1830s, even Northerners, they view abolitionists as the problem. Abolitionists are the one that are stirring up issues. Abolitionists are the one dividing the nation. And this poster really captures that sentiment. So
Hey, Mahoney.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. This is a little off topic.
Okay.
But did you notice when Cameron fell asleep in your class and me and Jared were throwing things in his mouth?
I did not, but I wish.
He was right in front of you and we were laughing so hard.
That's my kind of thing to get involved with too.
Yeah, well,
I didn't notice that.
He's right in front of you. That made my day. I think I have videos.
Next time you have fun. I don't know if you guys know Dante Coquinos.
Yeah.
He's graduated now, but he used to fall asleep in the back of my class with kind of his little afro, and we would put things in his afro while he was sleeping. And it was right after lunch, and we put like In-N-Out French fries all up in his afro, and yeah. So I like messing with
terrible.
people. He should have been sleeping. And they were his own In-N-Out fries. So not only did he come in late with In-N-Out burger, he fell asleep. He deserved it. Jack, next time include me in your fun game. I like those fun games. Next time include me.
I'm sorry. Next time I will include you.
All right. Good times. Just know the perspective, guys, that people have about abolitionists. Abolitionists are viewed as divisive. It's abolitionists that are causing dissent. Here's another one. Attention, Southern men, down with the abolitionist press. Guys, these Southerners are not above burning printing presses. There's a very famous man. He's on the next slide. His name is Elijah Lovejoy. He's a very outspoken abolitionist. Not only does he print a newspaper demanding immediate abolition like William Lloyd Garrison, he really, really steps on the toes of the elites in his state. I actually forget what state he lives in. It's not super important, but just be aware, guys, this is an example of violence against abolitionists. There will be abolitionists murdered, their property destroyed, and Elijah Lovejoy is our classic example of that. So yeah, it's not like you're going to be asked about Elijah Lovejoy specifically, but if you're talking about abolitionist literature, it would really help if you talked about the response to abolitionist literature. And again, it's going to be relatively violent in the southern states, whether it's burning the literature, burning these men in effigy, or actually committing acts of violence against them and their property. So know the strategy of abolitionists, flood the nation with literature, and know how Southerners are going to react like that. Remember, some abolitionists have other strategies that are violent. Men like Nat Turner and John Brown are going to have pretty violent strategies for resisting slavery. This is a vocabulary term. Look down at the bottom, folks. It's amalgamation. You have to remember what that is, and that's a mixed race society. It's social settings. Well, there's nothing sexual about this picture. It's a social scene. It looks like a dance party or some type of, social, social chorus or something like that. It's a social scene where the two races are engaging freely. That scares a lot of Americans, folks, in this time. It's going to scare a lot of Americans even up into the 1960s, folks. But that's amalgamation. You have to know what that vocab term is in case you see it. And the next word you have to know is miscegenation. That's interracial sex. Miscegenation, guys, is going to be illegal in most states all the way up into the 20th century. And it's still illegal in a few states until the 1960s. It's interracial marriage. It blows me away that Americans could, have such a problem with that. And it's not just an American problem, guys. People historically have had problems with mixed race marriages. It's a thing that human beings around the world have tripped about in historical contexts. So know what miscegenation is, but it just is so ironic. This didn't ever seem to stop, slave owners from sexually assaulting their black female slaves. So it's just the hypocrisy is if you don't cry about it, you have to just laugh about it and be like, that's ridiculous. So know those two vocab terms: amalgamation, mixed social setting, and miscegenation, interracial marriage. What we are to expect now that Mr. Lincoln's elected, that's a threat, guys. Look at how socially unacceptable interracial marriage is. They're willing to put that on a political pamphlet. You elect Mr. Abraham Lincoln, this is what you're going to get. Ooh, scary. The next topic I wanted to touch on briefly, guys, over the next 8 minutes before we end is the connection between females and abolition and female suffrage and equality. Many of these early female suffragettes, guys like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, they get their start in abolition. Many women are like talked down to at abolition conferences. Sometimes women aren't even allowed to speak at abolition conferences. That's what's going to spur the Seneca Falls Convention, which we'll talk about in a few moments, that famous women's rights conference. But guys, if you're talking about abolition, you have to talk about the role women play, and you have to talk about the connection to the broader women's rights struggle. The attempt to gain the right to vote, the attempt to gain the right to own property. Oh man, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. So please, guys, if you're ever given an essay on abolition, it has to include the role women play and the connection to the female equality movement in terms of voting rights and property rights. The American Anti-Slavery Society, guys, is actually going to split into two over the issue. Some members of the American Anti-Slavery Society want to include women in the struggle. Not only do we want to free African-American slaves, we want to free women from bondage as well. That idea is proposed, and the American Anti-Slavery Society splits over it. William Lloyd Garrison is one of the people who thinks that women should, be included, but a lot of them, other men in the American Anti-Slavery Society, guys, think that the women's issue is just going to, further polarize Americans and delay the freeing of African Americans. Men at the time might say, why would we focus on the women when we're focusing on the slave right now? Ladies, isn't that the most important thing, to focus on? They would really ask women to, put their own needs in the back seat while we focus on freeing the slaves or ending slavery. So know how divisive the issue is, even within the American Anti-Slavery Society. And again, the issue is women's equality, women's right to vote. I don't know how eloquently I explained that. So if you have any questions on it, guys, please speak up. You should know who Angelina Grimke is and her very famous source. If you're given an essay, guys, or a DBQ on abolition, it's very, very likely you'll see this source on it, and it's her Appeal to Christian Women of the South. She's trying to use moral suasion. It's like persuasion. I'm trying to use moral arguments to persuade you that it's just wrong to own a human being. Guys, I don't know what you would say if someone said, Jack Walsh, why is slavery wrong? I don't know what you would say, but it would probably be along the lines of like, I don't know, you just shouldn't own another human being. Most of us kind of think that that's just a basic moral understanding. Yeah, that's a human being. I might not like that person. They might be totally different than me, but you can't own them and own their labor. That's what most of us believe now. That's not something that people believed in mass in the 1830s, folks. And so Angelina Grimke is trying to use this concept of evangelical Christian moral suasion. Think of persuasion, moral suasion. If you can use the phrase moral suasion, guys, on the DBQ, I guarantee you're going to be getting those deep analysis points. Connecting women to the Second Great Awakening, connecting women to the struggle for female equality in Seneca Falls. This is a topic that you really should be able to get full credit on. Anyhow, remember that Angelina is going to be controversial because she speaks in front of mixed gendered crowds. They call it promiscuous crowds. She speaks to men in these, in these slavery conventions, and it's looked down upon by many people. It's so silly to me, but that's how it was. Understand that she came from the South, and that's why she has some kind of credit. She comes from a very wealthy and well-known slave-owning family in Charleston, South Carolina. After she publishes this letter, her appeal to the Christian women of the South, the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, actually threatens her with arrest if she comes back to Charleston. So she's going to be very firmly rejected, and her message will be as well. And
Yeah, her outfit's pretty scandalous.
it is scandalous. Look, I can see her neck.
Woo!
Angelina Grimke. And I showed you guys this yesterday, but I think it's worth pulling up again. We were talking about what are you watching on YouTube and stuff. Seriously, throw this on for 30 minutes. Maybe it won't capture your attention, but maybe it will. Oh, whoops. Help if your teacher could spell anything. I want to show it to you again. I know I showed it to you yesterday, but this is, for those of you that have Amazon Prime, this is something that could be really helpful. They talk all about Angelina Grimke in this. The portion where she's writing her essay and her connection with William Lloyd Garrison. Watch it. Okay, I've shown you. We can move on. Our final topic for right now, guys, is going to be the Seneca Falls Convention. And I've already kind of led you to this, but let's just talk about what it is. It's in 1848. So abolition, I mean, this is 17 years after William Lloyd Garrison's Liberator, guys. 17 years is as long as most of you have been alive. So I'm just trying to give you a kind of some time, some context for time here. 17 years of women being involved in the slavery cause, or I should say the anti-slavery cause. And this convention will come about because both Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they are refused, or I should say denied, the opportunity to speak at an anti-slavery convention in London. This is not the first time it's happened to them, but at this major anti-slavery conference in London, it's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. And these two women, Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they organized the Seneca Falls Convention. Now, Seneca Falls Convention, guys, we know it for the document that it produces. Remember, it's attended by both men and women, and what they produce out of this conference is the Declaration of Sentiments. So many people are going to satire the Declaration of Independence, guys, but it's this document that we know and it's famous for. They are going to basically chop the Declaration of Independence up and say things like all men and women were created equal. They'll insert the word her all throughout the document instead of he. They're essentially trying to just make a little bit of satire on the document and show how there might be these lofty ideas in our Constitution and lofty ideas in our Declaration of Independence, but they're not extending to women. And that's what they're trying to point out, guys. They're trying to point out the hypocrisy. They're trying to point out the irony of that, we may be American citizens, yet we don't enjoy the rights of American citizens. Remember, women are citizens, yet they don't have the right to vote. That's going to come up in a Supreme Court case in a couple chapters. I believe it's called Minor v. Happersett. And that affirms that, yeah, ladies, you're citizens. And yeah, voting is not a right that goes hand in hand with that. So it's beyond voting, guys. They're talking about divorce at this conference. They're talking about the ability of married women to own property. Because remember, if you're a married woman, you may not own property. Your husband owns it. They're also talking about employment rights as well. And they certainly do not believe in the separate spheres. Remember, ever since before Republican motherhood, guys, women have historically had this separate sphere of influence. It really gets reinforced with Republican motherhood and the cult of domesticity. These ladies aren't buying it. These are our early suffragettes, and please see their connection to abolition. Please see their connection to the Second Great Awakening. Susan B. Anthony is also very, very prominent. This is my last slide of the day, guys. Susan B. Anthony is very, very prominent in this era as well. You should just know who she is. I have a whole list of things that she advocates for, guys, whether it's, women getting custody of their children in divorce or the right to control your own paycheck. Those of you that work right now, some of you ladies have jobs. How would you feel if your paycheck went to your father? You're underage, so your father's going to get that pay. She's advocating for these types of things. I'm just saying she's really, really ahead of her time. Susan B. Anthony is someone who you could see a source from. Did someone type something in the chat? Look at that. Do all free men have the right to vote at this time, or just landowning people? Great question, Hope. If you are a white man, you're going to have the right to vote. Yes, that's exactly it, Grace. Universal white male suffrage. Really the 1820s. You're welcome. And it's state by state. So remember, every single state gets to determine their voting laws. But by the 1820s, basically every single state has eliminated property ownership as a requirement. We sync that up with Andrew Jackson, and that's probably a good reason why Andrew Jackson gets elected at the time, because so many more people can vote who aren't really like elite property owning men anymore. Great question. Great answer, Grace. So folks, my goal right now isn't to lecture on Susan B. Anthony, and my goal is to just remind you that she is one of the major characters as part of this story. And if you're talking about abolition or female equality, there's just so much overlap in this. This topic is one of those ones that just says so much information that overlaps. So it's really easy to get the analysis points because it's easy to show connections. That's how you get the analysis point, guys, is by showing connections between the religious movement, the Second Great Awakening, to the reform movement, abolition, to the reform movement, female equality. This topic out of all of them, I think, is one of the easiest ones to get full credit on. And this is only part of it, folks. We haven't done the sectional crisis at all. We'll do that obviously another day, but this is early abolition and the connection to female equality. My goal wasn't to say every single detail. My goal was to just lay out the framework and then kind of put in the basic evidence. I think I was kind of successful today. I gave myself a 70 today. Any questions, guys? That's where I'm going to stop. That concludes chapter 11. Basically today, look at those learning targets again and see if we talked about them. Do we talk about motives and strategies of early abolitionists? I think so. Violence and also literature. Do we talk about responses to abolition? I think so. Do we talk about divisions? Yeah, the divisions about females. And do we explain Seneca Falls? I think so. Very briefly, we did. So I'm pretty comfortable that we're good for the day. Before I stop recording, anyone have any questions for the group or for me?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Olivia's wearing a mask.
I put a face mask on. So for yesterday, you posted the practice DBQ.
Yeah.
I wasn't at the live because I had a layman live, but can we do that whenever we want? Like, do we have to do it by this Thursday? Okay.
You don't have to do it by this Thursday, Olivia, but I'm hoping I can get like 4 or 5 people to do it. And then I'm going to take the names off of 2 of them and I'm going to share them with you guys. And we're just going to talk about what we like about them and what we don't. You won't know whose they are. They'll be totally anonymous, but I'm just hoping I can get like 4 people to turn them by Thursday, which I think I will. So yeah, just practice. And then beyond that, like for you personally, Olivia, if you want to do it like next week or something, because you have more time and then check in with me one-on-one, we can totally do that. I can edit it and, help you individually. And that goes for anyone, not just Olivia, any single person. And I can offer that because I think only 5 or 10 people asked me to do that. But anyone who wants to write it, guys, I will give you one-on-one feedback all day with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else have any questions, guys? About anything? Are we still screen sharing? I'm glad that Olivia's face mask is now immortalized on the YouTube. Stop presenting, and we'll go ahead and stop recording.